Welcome to the RIA Tech Talk podcast brought to you by RIA Workspace. My name is David Kakish, and I'm here with Todd DeRoca. Together, we're on a mission to simplify the complex world of technology for RIAs, just like yours. The title of today's session, are you starting a new RIA? What's the best tech stack for a 5-person team? And I'm excited to have a special guest with us today. His name is Christopher Johnson, and Chris is the founder of TrigaByte Technologies, just outside of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. He's been in the financial services world for over 30 years. He looks a lot younger than that. He started when he was 5 years old. Anyways, he's got a boutique tech consulting firm where he also focuses on working with RIAs just like us. And so we complement each other really well. We actually, ironically, we don't compete at all, but we complement each other really well. We focus on managed IT, cybersecurity, IT compliance, and the help desk and the tech side of things. And then Chris really focuses on the operations and best practices and things like that. So Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, share with the listener a little bit about you, your company. And then, I'm really excited to talk about the best tech stack for a new RIA firm because, we're agnostic, right? Like we don't care what vendor or what partner to choose. So we don't represent Redtail or Wealthbox or eMoney or any of that right there. So we can really talk to what's best for that team and share some nuances and depth. But Chris, introduce yourself, talk a little bit about yourself, your company, and then we'll get right down to business.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. And thanks, Todd. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. As David said, Chris Johnson with TrigaByte Technologies, been in the industry for over 30 years. Really grew up in the operations, technology, and compliance side of the business. Most notably was a chief operations officer and chief compliance officer of a large RIA broker-dealer that managed about $3 billion in assets and had almost 100 people in the shop. So really know a lot about the infrastructure, how things work, what technology you use. After that role, actually ran a wealth management practice for about 6 years. So really got the client side experience. So when you look at my background and history, I've done almost every job in the industry, or at least have a good knowledge base of what happens with anything that really goes on within a practice. So from there, started TrigaByte Technologies, really looking to focus on RIAs and their practice and how they do things, why they do things, what they do, and the tools that they use it, because there's a real need in the industry for advisors to have someone to consult with that can help them with that. There are so many options out there, and it really comes down to what fits you best. And advisors have a difficult time figuring out really what is going to be the best tool for them. So that's where the value of my background comes into play. I can really help them in determining what is going to best suit them and then how to implement and get it working.
Cool.
So,
well,
pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great to have you on. And Chris and I, we were joking before we recorded. We're like, man, we're so happy to be able to geek out together and talk and go into this. Not too many people in this world that want to geek out about the tech stack for RIA. So we're really excited. And I've used the analogy where we're kind of like we're the peanut butter, and then Chris and TrigaByte is the jelly, and then we're so much better together, as a peanut butter and jelly. I mean, we're great separate, but together it's even that much better. And before we get to business, I'll share a funny story. Then we'll get down to business. But when I was in college, I used to paint houses. So I had to take my food with me and, outdoor, it had to kind of sit well. Anyways, for an entire summer when I was working, the only thing that I took with me was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every day because I knew how to make that, right? By the end of the summer, I did not want to touch a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for many years. Even now, I'm like, every once in a blue moon, I want a peanut butter and jelly, but that one summer ruined it for me. So anyways, little side story for,
got a PTSD from the PB&J, huh?
Exactly.
Yes. So, all right. So I think so, Chris, let's maybe start out with a problem, right? So a new RIA, whether you're a breakaway or whatever, it doesn't really matter to me at all. I think the big challenge is all this stuff was provided for you as an advisor when you're working at a larger firm.
Yes.
And so when you go out on your own, it's kind of overwhelming. and you're like, oh my goodness, what's the right tech stack, or what do you use? Maybe
Exactly.
Salesforce where you work, but hey, if you're starting out, is that the best thing for you to use starting out, as an example? So
Right.
I think the challenge is all this stuff was provided for you, and you were able to focus on the core competency of what you did. But
Yep.
once you go independent, or once you start a new RIA, you've got to solve these problems. You've got to come up with, like, what's the tech stack that we're going to use.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so
It's on
that's
your
kind of the
back to
big problem
figure
that
it
I
out.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if you see other things when people first start out.
No, I mean, that's a big question, and really why people come to me. It's like, well, what do I even use? Do I just stick with what I know, or is there something better? And the answer is it depends, because it really comes back to what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. You could have one RIA shop that does investment management through TAMPs, where another one builds their own models and does everything in-house, where they're not outsourcing stuff. So it really, what the question is, well, what do you want to control? What don't you want to control? How much control do you want to have? What's your budget look like? So there's a lot of questions that go into a needs analysis to help an advisor determine what tools even will work for me, or
Yeah.
what should I even be looking at,
Yeah.
right? So
Exactly. So we're gonna just, and this is a pretty common scenario where people reach out to us and they're like, "Hey, listen, we're starting a new RIA, 7 people, whatever the
yeah,
case might be, right? We're gonna say, look, new RIA, 5 people. One of the big foundational questions is, do I go, the Microsoft suite, or do I do Google Workspace, or do I do something else, right?
right,
This comes up a lot. I'll talk about that, and then we're going to talk about CRM and portfolio management. I'll give you the opportunity to talk there. And
yeah,
it's going to be what we're going to talk about is very practical, not some, we're not professors at some university talking about things in theory. This is going to be really
no,
hands-on, and real practical. So the Microsoft versus the Google suite, this really comes up a lot. I'm going to say in this space, just to be very blunt, the Microsoft suite is much more dominant than the Google Workspace. And I say this, my brother works for Google, and I think Google is great. But I think what's different here on the Microsoft for RIAs is, a lot of people are already familiar with the Microsoft suite. And then B,
yeah,
Microsoft has a lot more IT compliance and security safeguards that are
yes,
sort of built in, or you could easily implement them without third-party tools. Whereas with Google Workspace, it's a great platform, but you have to get a lot of third-party tools to archive, to be compliant, to do many, many other things. And what
yes,
happens is, and it's kind of funny, because last week I was talking to somebody where they had to go with what their broker dealer forced them to go with, and it was the Google suite. And he was complaining to me about all the different things, the third-party tools that they had to do. And when I
yeah,
sort of showed him how it works inside of the Microsoft ecosystem, it's sort of all consolidated in one place. It's like, yeah, it's exactly what we want, because they
right,
don't want to have Citrix, login. They don't want to have this, and that, right? So I'll make it easy for the listener. Unless there's a good reason for you to go with Google Workspace, Microsoft is the dominant player. And frankly, we've made the business decision that we will only be working with RIAs that are on the Microsoft platform. If they want to be on Google, great. That's not something that we're supporting. So that's a business decision we've made. Doesn't mean the other one is bad. It just means that for an RIA with 5 people, you're going to end up buying a whole bunch of third-party tools to achieve the
yeah.
IT compliance and what I would call the enterprise security, where with Microsoft is out of the box. So, Chris, that's kind of my assessment of that. I don't know if you have other thoughts, or even if you see the things differently from your perspective.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I generally, if a client is using the Google Workspace as a platform, I will probably not work with them, because there are so many different components that, even when you're looking at the rest of the tech stack, that come into play with, well, where you put your documents, what are you doing with them? And as you know, with Microsoft, you've got SharePoint and all of those things that come into
Yeah.
play, that have the security built in, and the things that the client needs to keep things safe. And I mean, I grew up with Microsoft. I've dabbled in Google and looked at it, and I agree. It's just there's so many different components that you then have to wrap in to make things work. that the Microsoft one-stop shop from a, infrastructure standpoint for me makes 100% sense. So,
And did I catch that right? If somebody's on the Google Workspace, you typically won't work with
I
them? Is that
try not to. Yeah,
okay?
I try
Interesting.
not to.
Okay. All
It's
right.
just very challenging to work with, well, I want to now save all my my DocuSign documents into my Google Workspace. And it's like,
Yeah. Okay.
I don't even know really how to help them with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. I
I
mean,
tend to
listen.
shy away from it.
Yeah. To be
Not that I
fair.
won't take it.
Yeah.
I'll help do assessments and stuff and do
Sure.
things like that. But a lot of the implementation that comes into play, the operating system and your infrastructure impacts that. And
Yeah.
I just don't know enough about it to really be able to help
Yeah.
someone that's in that
Yeah.
space.
And from our perspective, we know a lot about it, and we think
Yeah.
it's really good. But there's just so many third-party tools to get to where Microsoft is, and
Yes.
that's fine because Google was built that way and Microsoft was built differently. So
Right.
anyway, so
Absolutely.
we're in our space.
Yep.
So all right, so the easy
Question.
winner is Microsoft Suite. But Todd, you wanted to say
Yeah.
something
What
before.
about what about cost? Like if I'm just starting out, is Microsoft more expensive, or is Google the same once you start adding in the third parties? What kind of budget am I looking at for both of these?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you want me to take that, or you want to
Yeah,
take it?
I'll let you take that. Yep.
Okay.
No, that's
Yeah.
more in your space on the
Yeah.
licensing
Yeah.
and all of
That's
that. I
fine.
mean, I know it, but that's
Yeah.
Way to
this is
step
why
back on that one, Chris.
yeah, no, but this is why we partner together, right? Because you're
Exactly.
the expert in that, and the things that I do, you don't deal with. So I have knowledge in it just from working, with
Yep.
you and clients that have it. But yeah, I mean, you're the
Yeah.
expert on it, so
So
take
so
it.
even so, Todd, I think I'll set the pricing aside for a second. Kind of like what I talked about in the Google world is to accomplish what we're doing in the Microsoft world, you have to go get these third-party tools, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
I'll give you a really simple example, right? Archiving to meet SEC compliance. I can do the email archiving inside a Microsoft platform. I can do something called data loss prevention or DLP in the Microsoft
Hmm.
email, and where if I send out an email with a social security number or account number, it'll automatically detect it, encrypt it, and send it out. I can do encryption inside of the Microsoft ecosystem, right? I
Hmm.
gave you just like three specific examples where in the Google world, can you do it? Of course, you've got to go and you've got to find that third-party tool that'll do it for you. And where we see people using the Google platform is if they're really much larger organizations and they want to have all these platforms. And even then,
I
the
gotcha.
value proposition isn't there. So I think what happens is the pricing is kind of hard to compare apples to apples because Microsoft's got like a lot of different um, suites, like
Hmm.
there's the enterprise and there's the business premium. And that's my one criticism of Microsoft. They make it really hard to know what licensing package you want. But once you figure that out, right? By the time you start adding not just the cost of the third-party tools, but the cost of the integration and the cost of learning, it's just
Mm.
it just doesn't make sense, right? Microsoft becomes the clear winner. And then even setting aside these third-party tools that the integration and having to learn them, when you look at the cost, it's just it doesn't add up. You actually
Got it.
end out coming out ahead in the Microsoft world than in the Google world. That's kind
Got
of
it.
how it works. Yep.
And if
And
those
and
integrations change, right, David? I mean, if an integration changes and now you've got to adjust and adapt, that could be a lot of work for someone. So,
Yeah, and I'll say this, a lot of the financial applications do a really good job of integrating with Microsoft. And for
yes.
all the criticism that Microsoft is pretty partner centric and they work really well with partners with integrations and stuff like that. So at a really high level, without getting into the details, that's kind of what that is. Now, if we're talking about a different vertical, like maybe education or healthcare, right, it would be totally different. But here we're
Sure.
focused on specifically an RIA that's starting out that's got 5 employees. So,
Got
okay.
it.
Cool. All right. So, yeah, and we're not, again, we don't get any money from Microsoft or
No.
Google. We're just kind of talking what's on our mind. And I should put the disclaimer: nobody is paying us. Not Redtail, not Orion, not
No.
eMoney, not Microsoft. We're not getting anybody. We're just having fun and we're chit chatting. So, all right, the
Absolutely.
second category, Chris, that we want to talk about is the CRM because that's one of the core things for a financial advisor.
Absolutely. Yep.
Why don't you talk a little bit about that and what would what are you seeing, and what would you recommend for a new RIA, with a 5-person team?
Yeah, so I mean, the CRM, as you said, it's kind of the core of your day-to-day operations and what where you live and where your assistants and people live every day. That's where client information is. That's where you maintain stuff. That's where you put notes. That's where you have meetings. So that's really the core. From a small RIA, it depends. There isn't a perfect one that I can say this is the go-to for sure, because it really depends on what you do, how you do it, why you do it. Those are the key components that I really get deep into with my clients in order to determine what is going to be their best solution. Now, there's a lot of people that use Redtail, have used Redtail for a long time. They love it. A lot of my clients use Redtail. Great tool, but there's limitations with it, right? There's only so many drop-down lists you can create in there and ways to organize your data. They have it kind of built a certain way. Whereas something like Salesforce, you can customize 100% on your end, or you can have a firm come in and build an overlay that overlays onto Salesforce that really has very unique and specific ways of integrating your data, using your data, integrating with other systems that maybe Redtail doesn't do. So, there isn't a perfect silver bullet like we've talked about that,
Yeah.
you shoot and say, this is what we're aiming for. It's really about the needs of the firm and how you get to that.
Yeah, and we should let the listener know that our previous podcast we did record was just taking a deep dive in just CRMs, and we
Yeah,
covered the 6 main ones. But I think so like the two that come up in like a new RIA a lot, for
yep.
me at least, is Redtail and Wealthbox, right?
Wealthbox.
Those are the
Yeah,
two big ones that
absolutely.
kind of come up.
Yeah,
Most of the Redtail probably by far number one, and then
yeah,
Wealthbox. So let's, again, we're not talking about a team of 20, 30 people. We're not talking
right.
about an established team. We're talking about a new team.
Yes,
What would you say maybe are the primary ones, where we want to kind of keep it simple, right? Because hey, if they
absolutely.
grow and their AUM and their people grow later on, that's cool. But in the beginning, what are you seeing out there? And if it was your RIA, right, what would you run with and why?
Yeah, I mean, Redtail is definitely the dominant one with Wealthbox in, a very close second. You've got between the two, Redtail is very simple to use. It was built by financial planners for financial planners. It really has the tools that a small team can utilize. The workflows are pretty easy to build, but they can get clunky as you get bigger. So that's why, a small team, you can build very simple, straightforward workflows that a user can learn and use to help automate and create, a flow where they don't forget different steps in a process. Wealthbox has similar tools. I like Redtail a little more just because I think it's a little more common. So there's a lot of people that have, maybe already used it in their prior firm, and now
Yeah.
this new firm, it might be easy for them to just step into. But Redtail has over 100 integrations, where I think Wealthbox doesn't have quite as many. So some of the integrations, how they link with custodians, it's pretty straightforward. So, I think Redtail's really easy to use. It's not complicated. It's not really, crazy. Like Salesforce can get very complicated and sophisticated in how things work. So, I like Redtail, but I like Wealthbox too. So
Yeah.
again, it
Okay.
really comes back to what are the needs. There may be a firm that says, well, I need this, and so Redtail's not,
Yeah.
an option where Wealthbox is
Sure.
because of something,
Yeah.
or you look at Redtail and they go, well, we use it at a prior firm and it's really easy, so I like it. And then you dig into, well, why do you like it?
Yeah.
What about that do you like, and how it really help your new firm um,
Sure.
in
So what,
practice?
yeah, from what we see, right? And again,
Yeah,
our view is very limited. I think we see Redtail quite a bit, and then, a
yeah,
distant second is Wealthbox, and then
yeah,
occasionally we'll see like Advison, and then
yep.
Advisor Engine, which I think used to be
Vice
Juncture, right? Yeah.
Juncture, yep,
Yeah.
yep. I
So
see that in bigger firms because bigger
okay.
firms are what had Juncture in the
Yeah,
past,
okay.
because that was a in-house. You had to have a separate server
Yeah,
before
yeah.
and a desktop application before they had to get into the cloud and built out their cloud application.
Yeah.
So
do you see many, like I'm seeing some, but like a distant third, like Advise on, are you seeing that too?
I
Or
personally haven't come across that one really that
interesting.
often.
Okay.
It's really Redtail, Wealthbox, Salesforce a lot,
Yeah.
with some of the bigger firms that I work with. But yeah, in the smaller space, everybody that I, come across, it's usually um, Redtail, Wealthbox, and sometimes Tamarack or
Yeah.
their
Okay.
whole product, the Microsoft Dynamic product, their CRM
Yeah.
that's kind of integrated with their trading stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's kind of funny. Redtail seems to be sort of a safe one, right? And
it's
there's
safe.
a
Yeah. Cost
you know,
effective.
yeah. There's a great quote. I think it used to be for like in the tech space that nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM, right?
Right.
And so their competitors would say, well, nobody ever got promoted for hiring IBM either.
Correct.
So
Yes.
I feel
That
like
is
Redtail was
very
like
true.
that safe one, right? Dominant one, and
Absolutely.
then
Well
so
known when you're at
yeah.
conferences. There's a lot of people that you can network with that use Redtail and you can have conversations. Well, what do you do for this? And that was something that back when I was running, the RIA, at conferences, we had best sharing practice groups that we would get together and talk about these things,
Yep.
and back then, I was using Juncture. At
Hmm.
that point, it was the desktop app, and all of the
Yeah.
big firms that we met with were also using Juncture.
Yeah.
So, it was a great way to network and talk about, hey, what challenges do you have? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And
Red
speaking
Tail's so
of,
common
yeah,
that
yeah.
that's what happens at conferences. So
Yeah. Well, and Juncture was like the very dominant one when it was a server world.
absolutely.
And I
Yeah,
think I think they missed the boat on the cloud. And I think
they
Redtail just
did.
sort of,
They were late to that game for
yes,
sure.
exactly.
Very late to
Exactly.
that game. And I think, but to their credit, they had built a product that really for larger firms,
Yeah.
even though it was very deep into your infrastructure, its own server, desktop
Yeah.
application, a lot of that kind of stuff. It worked really well with workflows and how big advisor teams needed to function every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, yep,
Yeah. So cool. All right. So we talked about CRM. Thank you, Chris. We're going to talk about
yep,
portfolio management software, and there's a
sure,
lot of them out there.
there
And
is.
I'll let you. I'm out of my area of expertise, so I'm gonna
Well,
hand the mic
boy,
over to you.
yeah. So portfolio management, an ever-changing landscape. Orion and let's see, Orion and Riskalyze have announced just here in August that they are decoupling their whole one-stop shop and going to be offering slices of the pie for their different services because they found that if the one-stop shop for everything is limiting their growth ability. Michael
Really?
Kitces actually wrote a lot about this. Yeah, in his August article about how they're gonna start offering, you can buy just the trading piece, you can buy just this slice. So that's going to change the landscape a little bit for options, for advisors, small advisors that just need portfolio management. They don't want the trading. They don't need all these other tools that come together with like an Orion. Whereas, a Black Diamond, most people know Black Diamond, Advent, the
Yeah.
old Advent kind of combined a few years ago. And, Black Diamond's one of the big go-tos. Well, some people don't realize they have a rebalancer also where you can do your trading through that, not just portfolio management. In the, when I say portfolio management, I'm talking about performance reporting, the billing aspect. So Black Diamond's a big go-to. I think really the other dominant one it has been, I mean, InvestNet is huge, right? But it costs a lot because you've got, again, all of the components that are built into it. Orion, again, was expensive because you had all of those other components. We'll see what they do with their pricing as they
Yeah.
start separating things out. It might become much more cost effective to do something like Orion in the near future. And then there's other ones that people probably have heard of but aren't as prevalent. Adipar, Digit, Vestmark, Advisor, ARC. I mean, there's a lot of different portfolio management,
Yeah,
Tamarac, Investnet, they've got their product. So a lot to choose from. Again, it comes back to the needs of the client and really what they want to do with it. Are they doing just billing? Are they just
sure.
doing portfolio accounting and performance? Do they need trading? Do they want it to integrate with their CRM? So there's a lot of questions that you have to ask to drill down to what's really going to be the best solution for
Yeah.
them.
So I'm going to jump in. I think you kind of touched upon this, that there's two approaches to this, right? Which is, hey, best in class, and then sort of an
Absolutely.
all-in-one, right? And you
Yeah,
have to think about that. And that's sort of a philosophical decision that, hey, no, we want to keep it simple. And we kind of want to have an all-in-one. And hey, that's
absolutely.
great. And that makes a lot of sense. Or no, we want to have the best in class in this category and stuff like that. And what I see, but take what I say with a grain of salt. When we talk about like best in class, I see like Black Diamond, Advent quite a bit. And then when we want
Absolutely.
sort of all in one, I see Orion kind of like
Orion.
those are
Yeah.
kind of the two that I see. But let's sort of talk about best in class first, and then sort of an all in one. So from your perspective, best in class portfolio management. Again, we're not talking about the bigger RIAs, team
Yeah.
5 people. Like what are you seeing, and what do you think would be, because I'm trying to be very practical too. I'm like, somebody is clueless,
Absolutely.
or we
Yeah.
use this at this big firm, and now I want to figure it out myself. So best in class, what are your top choices? I'm curious.
Yeah, so between Black Diamond, Tamarac's a good one, but again, cut very, expensive. Those are the most common I mean, people use Morningstar Office. I see that once in a while. So, I'm trying to think. Tamarack, Orion, Morningstar Office, Black Diamond, those are the most common that I come on.
Sure.
Advise on now, as they continue to gain a little market share, they've got a portfolio management piece that also, is integrated with their CRM.
Okay.
So that's something to look at and watch.
Yeah. Okay.
Redtail, however, doesn't, right? So Redtail doesn't have portfolio accounting built in. You can link your accounts so that you can see them all together in Redtail, but it doesn't do your performance reporting or your billing or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's one question that I get a lot. Well, if I have a CRM that doesn't integrate, how does that work? And so, the best in class stuff comes into play when you start talking about that.
Sure. Okay. And now the flip side of that is sort of an all-in-one. I'm like, I don't want to have the complexity. I kind of, yes, I
Yeah.
know I might pay more, but
Yeah.
we're starting out, we're 5 people. Maybe when we grow, or when we're more established after a couple of years, I'll start looking at best in class and sort of get this piece and this piece and this piece. But for now, we're
Yeah.
starting out. I want to get an all-in-one. For a person, for a new RIA with 5 people, what are you seeing, and what would you recommend?
Yeah, that really InvestNet is probably the biggest. Between InvestNet and Orion are the two top that are considered an all-in-one. And Riskalyze is in there too, but they're an interesting thing. They've dabbled in a lot of different places, and I don't, in my opinion, have never really been able to pull it fully together like Orion has.
Sure.
Orion's been along for a long time. And I mean, now you have all of your other held away assets too that you have to consider, right?
Yeah.
And Pantera's really come into play with 401k, and you know, so I think really Orion and Tamarack are the two kind of all in one that I see most
Yeah.
most often in that space.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. For me, what I see a lot, and it doesn't, you know, this is what we see, right? But it doesn't mean
Yeah.
what's best or why. I actually see, Black Diamond quite a bit, and then I
Yep.
see Tamarack and Orion. Those are kind of like the two big ones that I see.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, all right, it's almost like the choice is, like, hey, here's what you're gonna do, and here's why. Or maybe these are the safe ones, right? I don't know, or
Right.
the dominant players, but that's what I see from our perspective. But we never, because we don't get into the level of like what you do, we never get into the nuances. And I'm so glad that you're sharing the nuances, because that's what matters, right? For the listener. So
Absolutely. Well, and the part about when you start thinking portfolio management, a lot of it does come back to, well, what do you do? Are you managing the assets yourself, or are you farming it out to a third party?
Yeah.
And if you're farming it out, like let's say you have, I'll just use InvestNet as an example. There are so many separate account managers that you can get on the InvestNet platform. Same with Orion. But so if that's how you do business, that's probably what you're going to be looking for, especially if you're using like an asset marker and SEI, right? All of those managers are out there and available through InvestNet, and you've got that whole, new account opening, you've got billing, you've got portfolio accounting, so performance reporting and trading and all of that, built into one component, but it's expensive. And so if you're a small 5-person shop, you have choices to make as you build out your tech stack on, well, where can I really afford to spend and how much can I afford to spend? And does that fit within my budget? Whereas a Black Diamond, less expensive, not as quite extensive as what you can do because they don't have separate account managers connected to it the way Tamarack or the way InvestNet Tamarack does. So,
yeah, interesting. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Are you
Go ahead,
are
Todd.
you seeing a lot of like in my space, a lot of the tools are being either acquired or they're consolidating it into one company, and it sounds like
Yeah.
they're the one you were talking about. They did consolidate, but now they're splitting back up. Are you seeing more consolidation, and that's just an outlier, or are you seeing these guys stay separate from each other?
Well, I think there's a lot of consolidation, and like InvestNet, I think here just announced they're actually going private. They've got a big investor that came in, and InvestNet now is going, private, which is interesting because they've been public for a long time and a big player. And so I was surprised to see Orion say that they are now allowing or offering separate services. Like you don't have to buy the whole thing in one. But it makes sense because market share, right? There's so many advisors out there and everybody's trying to gain market share. Well, if you're an all-in-one solution and you're expensive, these smaller firms and there's a lot of firms, breaking away or starting up their own RIAs because they want that revenue that they're paying another firm to be in-house. And so if they can't afford you, you're not even an option right out of the gate. Well, if you start allowing or offering separate pieces of your solution as an offering, you can gain more market share. And I think the idea maybe is, well, if they get in on this piece, they'll see that we can go all in one, and maybe eventually they become an all in one client, because now they know us and they've used us and they like our service and all of that. But it was interesting that both Orion and Riskalyze, are separating and starting to offer individualized services. Yeah. Great question though. I mean, it's been a consolidation game for a long time. I mean, look at what InvestNet has done. The places they bought in Orion. Orion owns Redtail. What's going to happen there? They bought them out. What was it, a year and a half ago or so? So we'll see what sort of integration they come along with their all-in-one solution with Redtail as the core CRM. We haven't seen a lot yet, but I would guess that's on the horizon.
Yeah, and when you think about it, it's a smart business decision to say, "Hey, yes, use this tool because now, we have this other tool, right?" And it's a lot easier to, cross sell, right,
Yeah.
than not to. And I think that's part of what's happening in the market. So, all right, so financial planning tools, right? And this kind of plays into what we talked about before. Maybe let's, maybe let you talk a little bit about that, and then. There's a couple of other things that we'll quickly talk about, but financial planning tools from your perspective, Chris.
Sure. I mean, the most ones, the ones I come across most often, eMoney and Money Guide Pro. Those are the two.
Pepsi and Coke.
Yeah, you got it. And then Navaplan, running in third usually.
I'm sorry, what was the third one? You said it.
Navaplan.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So that's kind of those are the three that have been around in from what I know for a long time. But when you look at like financial planning, the other pieces that are out there now, that has really grown.
Yeah.
And, I don't come across a lot of them because many of the clients that I work with have been in business for a long time and already have been using, eMoney or Money Guide Pro or Navaplan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to convert off of a planning tool to another planning tool is very, very painstaking. And, why do it unless there's something that you have to have in another tool that your current tool doesn't have? So,
Yep.
yeah.
So I'm gonna use an analogy here, and Chris, you're gonna laugh because you're gonna know this because you're from Minnesota. eMoney and Money Guide Pro is the Pepsi and the Coke, and
Yes.
Navaplan and the others are the Shasta Cola, and the other
They are.
like very distant like third.
Yeah.
I mean, but yes, eMoney and Money Guide Pro is what I hear all the time. Those are
Yes.
kind of the big ones. So, all right.
Navaplan was there. They were kind of like Juncture. They were an in-house desktop app for a long time, and they were slow to getting to that web-based solution where eMoney really has almost, has always been a web-based offering. And so, yeah, they just, and Navaplan is very complicated. You can get very sophisticated. If you have, very extremely high net worth clients that need the real sophisticated planning stuff, Navaplan is really your go-to because they have that depth.
Yeah.
eMoney's getting there, but eMoney's more of like a cash flow, right? They're all about cash flow.
Yep.
And when you've got big estate things that these very large high net worth people have, maybe Navaplan is a better option for you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then custodian, I think you and I were big fans of Schwab. There are others,
I am Schwab. There are others. So in my experience, I've been on Schwab, NFS or Fidelity, Pershing, PrimeVest, which was a small self-clearing firm. And so, I've touched a lot of different, TD Ameritrade, all of those, now Schwab. And so Schwab's my favorite. I mean, I know a lot of people there. I've used them for a long time.
Yeah.
They do a great job. They had some challenges with the merger with TD and their service levels, but I think they're kind of through that and getting that. But they really understand our business. They started, their RIA channel a long time, way back in the 90s, right? So they've really that's been a part of their market for a long time.
Yeah.
So,
well, and what I am really impressed about Schwab that I haven't seen the others do is that they really help the new RIAs get up and running. And
absolutely.
And they, it's very white glove service and they go above and beyond. And even though, technically they're just the custodian, there are so many other things that, they provide for them or at least introduce them, right? To people like you and me and others and things like that. And I think I have not seen that with other custodians, right? I think there's just so much value add in the beginning that they provide. So again, there are many others, but if I were starting my RIA, I would definitely go with Schwab over anybody else,
Yeah, that would be that's my top choice for sure. Again, depending on needs too, you still have to look at the needs of the firm and maybe Fidelity's because they have a certain niche in, maybe alternative investments or something like that where you're really big on, I've got to have this, as part of my offering where maybe Schwab doesn't have it. That would be the reason to look elsewhere. But actually a lot of a lot of my larger clients have they're multi-custodian. They don't just have one.
Yeah, that's pretty.
And the small
usually,
ones,
usually there's a primary, but they have a couple of clients that are with somebody else or something like that. Yeah, which is very common. So, okay, cool. All right. Communication archiving. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll kind of turn it over to you if you want to add to that or not. But the idea there is, hey, from a compliance perspective, you need to archive your email, you need to archive your, instant message on Teams, and maybe social media, maybe text. You definitely need to talk to your outsourced compliance company, whoever your compliance officer is, and say, hey, if we're using texting with clients, do we need to archive that or not? Right. So I'm not going to answer whether or not you need to archive that, but the companies that do the communication archiving, again, because you're on the Microsoft platform, Microsoft has the ability to archive, and it drives me crazy because not a lot of people know this. You can archive your email and you can archive Teams inside of
Yep.
Microsoft, and it's SEC and FINRA compliant. But so many RIAs do not know that. So
Yep.
many consultants do not know that. And that's something we just set up for our clients by default. Now, when it comes to archiving social media, text messages, and stuff like that, I mean, there's again going back to the Pepsi and the Coke, right? It's Smarsh
Yeah.
and Global Relay. And
Absolutely.
then the RC Cola or the Chasta or whatever. There's a company called Message Watcher, that's pretty good. I like those guys a lot.
Yep.
But those are kind of Smarsh is kind of the premium one,
Smarsh. Yeah.
a premium platform and a premium price.
Yeah.
So
Global Relay's not cheap either.
yeah,
They're,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But
Yep.
we've had a lot of people pretty happy with Message Watcher.
Okay.
By the way, so those are kind of the ones
Yep.
that would be there. So I don't know if there's more you wanted to add to that, or you kind of
I have
defer
a
to me on
client that
this.
uses Presults, which has been decent. But they had a couple of their senior people leave recently and start another firm. And so the new firm, I'm kind of looking at that to see what they look like. But yeah, I mean, Smarsh, Global Relay, Presults,
Yeah.
Message. Yeah, I mean, and if you really look, there's another one. Let me think. Hold on. I can't remember the name that I'm seeing a little more with. Oh, Smart RIA is, a compliance. Well, that's not really archiving. I guess they're more
Well, yeah, but that
infrastructure.
leads us into the
Yeah.
next topic. When it comes to compliance, right? You need
Yeah.
to. We don't want to get too much into it, but from a compliance perspective, you want to have an in-house, chief compliance officer, a CCO, but you still want to
Absolutely.
work with an outsourced compliance companies. And there's just so many of them out there.
There are.
Man, that's. I guess let me ask you that question. I didn't
Yeah.
even think about that, but do you? Because there's so many out there. Do you have? I personally don't have a preference. Do you have a preference for a new RIA with 5 employees
No,
or
I mean,
not? Okay.
Advisor Assist is good for small,
Okay.
small. They use Advisor Cloud 360 and the tool is decent. It's just very it's a little clunky and it doesn't really integrate that well with much.
Okay.
But it's very reasonable from a cost standpoint
Sure.
point. And
Okay.
so, I mean, I like them. You've got Red Oak, you've got Smart RIA, there's so many different providers out there that can
Yeah.
do that for you.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's interesting. What I find here is many new RIAs already have a relationship with some kind of compliance company, and they generally bring
yes,
them on, right? And they're just
yes,
like I feel like there's just so many out there. And this is not
yeah,
a scenario where it's a Pepsi and a Coke, right? I feel like this
no,
is this is more like there's literally probably hundreds of them out there.
there are.
And generally speaking, they're pretty good, but it's difficult for me to go in and say, oh yeah, here's one or here's two. We're happy to
Yep,
refer people when they ask, but
absolutely.
it's very rare that they ask because they already typically have these established relationships. So
Yeah, because you need that. Usually, you need that right from the onset, to even form, the SEC registrant.
yeah,
You need a compliance consultant or someone to help you with that because Form ADV in filing that is not a simple thing to
yep,
fill out,
yeah,
and if you do it wrong, you might not get approved. So, yeah, you've got someone that's behind the scenes helping you with that and you've met them through your custodial relationships or other relationships in the industry. I mean, I've got someone that I've worked with for years that's fantastic, smart guy, uh, attorney, knows compliance back of his hand, and I've referred clients to him when they want to break away and start their own shop.
sure,
The challenge with that is he doesn't have a tool, right? He does the legal work and that piece of it and your infrastructure, but now how do you do the management and monitoring of all you know, your quarterly transactions for your people that need to be supervised and all of that. You need a tool that can help you with that.
yep,
So
yep,
and that's where those other players come into
sure,
focus on, you
okay,
know, I need
cool.
a software that can do this work for me.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
I want to talk about a managed service provider, but I want to save that last. Is there
Yeah.
anything else we need to talk about, like maybe performance reporting, trading, rebalancing that, or maybe any other category that maybe, we didn't touch upon that you would say, yeah, hey, from a tech stack perspective, let's talk about these things.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, and why I like Schwab is, they've got iRebal now as part of the TD merger. And iRebal from a trading and, it's a trading platform, portfolio management trading platform. I really like what iRebal offers in the integration with Schwab. Whereas some of the other ones, they have integrations, of course. All trading has to be as automated as possible, right? But
Yeah.
I'm really beginning to like what iRebal, that offering has because of its connection with Schwab. We didn't talk a lot about, trade management tools, but, you've got Tamarac, InvestNet, iRebal, Black Diamond, has their own. So there's a lot of options out there. And again, it comes back to what your needs are. But yeah, I'm really liking iRebal with Schwab.
So, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe the last thing, and then what I want to do is recap and say if this was my RIA, this is who I would hire for each category. But I want to talk about managed service provider, which is the space we play in, RIA
Yeah,
Workspace.
absolutely.
I think, our number one quote unquote competitor is a local IT provider. And generally what we see a lot of new RIAs do is because they're comfortable, they hire a local IT provider. They're 5 people, they're 7 people starting out. And then within a year, if not sooner, they realize, oh my goodness, this local IT provider can't service us because the
Yeah.
fundamental problem is you're small from a headcount perspective, right? You've got 5 people, 7 people, employees, but you need what I would call like an enterprise platform and enterprise security. And that
Yeah.
local IT provider just doesn't get that because to him, you're just a small business, you're a small company. He wants to work with clients that have, 30 plus employees, right?
Hmm.
We see this challenge all the time. So um, when they reach out to us, I always tell them like you've saved 1 to 2 years of your life because you reached directly to us rather than having to wait going through a local IT provider. Now, outside of that, right, there's 2 people that we kind of come across. So we're RIA Workspace, just to be transparent. Outside of that, there's Ven, which is used to be OS 33. They used to be a pretty big player in providing outsourced IT services or managed services for the RIA vertical, but since then they've kind of moved into becoming more of a software platform. And they just don't focus on RIAs anymore. And then there's a company called Visory, which is owned by a private equity firm. You know this, they bought out True North Networks, they bought out Right Size Solutions,
Yeah.
and those were really great companies. And now people come to us leaving Visory like customer service is terrible,
Yeah.
just like nightmare stories, right? And that's what happens when you get owned by a private equity firm that also focuses on RIAs and accounting firms and construction, right? Because at the surface of it, an accounting firm and an RIA looks the same. In practice, they're so fundamentally different, and so
Absolutely.
that's one of the big problems that's happening there. And then there was a company called Itegria, right, that got bought out by RIA in a box and then by Comply, right? And they had a really good, what I would call an Amazon cloud workspace solution or a cloud computer, but that technology is way past due. And so a lot of people are leaving that because Comply really focuses on compliance and not tech and MSP and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So that's kind of like if I were starting, being objective, right? And it's hard for you to
Yeah.
be objective. If I were starting out, I would choose RIA Workspace as my MSP, So, but again,
I
I'm a
would
little
too.
bit biased.
No, I would too. I'm a little
So,
biased too, but I would
yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. So what I want to do, so we covered a lot. We covered a lot. And I'm gonna pretend I'm starting a new RIA with a team of 5 people, right? I would choose
Yeah.
the Microsoft Office suite as a platform. And I could
Yeah.
use, by the way, Windows computers or MacBook computers. It doesn't really matter. But I would definitely use the Microsoft suite instead of the Google suite.
Yeah.
Personally, if you were to ask me what CRM I would use, I would probably start out with Redtail.
Yeah.
In terms of portfolio management and software, if I wanted the best in class, I would probably choose Black Diamond. If it was an all-in-one, I'd have to really vet out Tamarack and Orion, and that's sort of a tough one.
Absolutely. Yep.
I would probably do Tamarack since they own Redtail, right?
Orion owns
Or
Redtail.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I got that wrong. I'd
Yep.
probably do
Orion.
Orion since they own
Yep.
Redtail.
Yep.
Um, e-money is what I would do for
Yeah.
financial planning. Custodian, definitely Schwab. Communication archiving, I would maximize Microsoft. I would probably get Message Watcher because I want to be budget friendly.
Yep.
And then an MSP, like I said, RIA Workspace. And then what am I missing? What am I missing? So I just went through a tech stack of my RIA. What am I
Yep.
missing, Chris?
Well, so really, so you've got the CRM component, with Black Diamond, you've got portfolio accounting, billing, and trading. If you want trading, they have a
Yeah,
rebalancer product that's part of that. Um, on the compliance side, so the compliance side, you've got all of your employee monitoring that you have to, not just their social media accounts, but you have to capture all of their account activity if they're required to be supervised. So all of your advisors, right, have to be supervised, and you have to monitor their trading activities so they're not doing front running and all these other things, right, that advisors can do. So the compliance tool, I think, is where there's an open space there, and whether it's Advisor Assist or some of the other tools out there, that's a plug that needs to be filled in how you manage and oversee all of your,
yeah,
because you've got your cybersecurity certifications, you've got your procedure certifications, you've got all of those pieces that every year or every quarter that you have to have people recertify. Yep, I haven't done any trading in our, our our list of securities that you can't trade in, and all of that. And
sure.
some of that's dependent on the type of activity that the advisor does too, and what requirements you have to follow. But you need a system and a way to capture and manage and monitor all of that.
Yeah, I missed that one as I went through the summary. Thank you for bringing that up. And
Yep,
I'm kind of pretending like this is a Figment RIA, right? I kind of quickly
absolutely.
listed like, hey, here's the tools that I would use, and
Yep.
hopefully the listener can look at that and kind of get a sense of what makes a lot of sense. Todd, I know I've been asking a lot of the questions because I'm geeking out with Chris. Anything on your end that you wanted to ask or you wanted to add?
No, I think that's great. It's just, you two like two like best friends at recess who gossip, and I just kind of like watching. So no, it's good. No, I got no other questions for Chris.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
I think I'd actually add one more piece to this that I think maybe is more kind of perceived, or maybe it's when you talk CRM, document management.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, Redtail has imaging, but
Yep.
there are other document management systems. In Microsoft, you've got SharePoint and OneDrive and that kind of stuff. But where are you maintaining your books and records client files? And that really comes back to your document management tool. And if you're using Redtail, of course, you should use Redtail imaging. But there are other solutions out there. You've got Laserfiche, you've got DocuPace, Laser app, which is form filling. You've
Yeah.
got quick forms. There's other things that can help you automate stuff from an operations standpoint.
Yeah.
And that's one of the other components that I don't think advisors think about when they are setting up their own firm is how do you automate some of the work that gets done every day? And one of the big things is in auto-populating your forms. And we didn't really touch on that at all. But Schwab has integrations with, DocuSign, DocuPace, Laser app, all of those
Yeah.
pieces. So, but that's a component that I think you need to also remember when
Yeah.
you're looking
Yeah.
at this.
Well, there's document management, there's document management automation, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
what we generally see is when we talk about like red tail imaging and Laserfiche and some of the other ones, these
Hmm.
are sort of at advanced stages. And
They
what we
are.
found is once people sort of understand the power of SharePoint, they end up doing a lot of things inside of SharePoint.
Yeah,
But like the document management automation, that could be just a separate podcast in and of itself because that
absolutely.
could save a ton of time for RIAs and things like
Definitely.
that. So but
Yeah.
yeah, so
And I think
um
one other piece too, sorry,
yeah,
David,
no,
is
go for it.
client facing, client portal. That's another piece that we didn't talk about at all. We were talking more internal. What
Yep.
does the advisor do? But how do they present to their clients, right? And client portal's a big part of that in how you deliver your quarterly performance reports. eMoney has a portal for uploading documents, from an estate planning standpoint. So there's different tools and ways that you also need to interact with your client, and a client portal is a big part of that. So
Yeah. Well, since you brought it up, I mean, what are your favorite ones? What are the ones
well,
that you
yeah, Black Diamond has a great portal, and again, if you're doing portfolio management where you're producing quarterly performance reports, most of your tools are going to have a client portal. eMoney has a client portal. InvestNet has a client portal, Tamarack, they all have client portals, but I don't think that advisors think that much about it when they're starting to set up their own shop. And it's something that the question needs to be asked as you're vetting out these solutions is, hey, do you have a client portal where it's going to be easy for me to push out my reports to, so I don't have to email them, or I don't have to, print and mail,
yeah.
which, hopefully advisors aren't printing and mailing things today, but some still do, because there are clients that, don't even have email addresses. So
What's your yeah, and by the way, I'm glad you brought it up because it's a subset of many of the other tools, but
it
what's
is.
like if it were you, what is your favorite client portal? And I know I ask,
Yeah.
interesting questions. I'll call them interesting to put you on the spot. But what's your favorite, or what
I
are your
like
favorite client portals?
Yeah, I like both. I mean, I like eMonies and I like Black
Okay.
Diamonds.
Yeah,
Those are
that's
the
right.
two
Okay.
that are very, they've really spent a lot of time and energy building them out to work well for the advisor.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that was part of my tech stack that I chose for my new RIA. That's good.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, listen, Chris, I've been asking a lot of questions. We've been going back and forth. Before we wrap up this call, anything else you wanted to add? Again, new RIA, the best tech stack for a 5-person team. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think we've covered a lot of
Okay.
different places that, advisors need to think about
Yeah.
what do they even need to
Sure.
to have their own firm.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great conversation. I mean, we could get into a lot of other stuff, digital marketing and sales enablement and scheduling client meetings and all. I mean, that's
Yeah.
one, right?
Yeah.
Calendly,
Hmm.
OneSub, all of those. So there's a whole realm of other things that, as I work with my clients and in helping develop out what's their tech, their
Yep.
tech stack look like,
Hmm.
what are their needs? It all
Sure.
comes back to the needs of the advisor, and that's really how you get into, well, what should you even choose?
Yeah.
And do we even look at a calendar scheduler if, 90% of your clients are 70 plus and they don't use computers? Well, no, you don't need a calendar scheduler, because why pay for it if nobody's
Sure.
going to use it? So yeah, that's that whole needs analysis. That's really important.
Yeah, I think what we tried to accomplish here is I know there's a lot more to this, but
Yeah.
at least kind of cover like, hey, what are the primary
Go.
things that we
Yeah.
want to cover that maybe people don't even think about or that they have a lot of questions around, right? I think generally
Absolutely.
people say, yeah, we want to use Zoom versus Teams, or they have a sense of that.
Yep.
Maybe we prefer Calendly over booking, and you're right, there's other components, but I
Yep.
think listen, if you're a new RIA, you're starting out, or you're going to start out, or you're thinking to go on your own, right? You definitely want to listen to this and then kind of write, take notes and say, yeah, hey, here are the different components. And then I would strongly encourage you to reach out to Chris, and reach out to us too. But Chris is probably your first point of contact because Chris knows this and knows this, really well, and kind of guide you through, based on your requirements. And Chris, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, really best way is either email or phone. And email, it's chris@trigabytetech.com. So sounds like gigabyte, but trigabyte. And then phone is 612-817-7767.
Okay, perfect. And we'll include that in the show notes so you guys can see that. And if it's a new RIA, thinking about starting out or they just started out, what's your process? Do you initially schedule like a discovery call or just walk through your
Yeah.
process a little bit?
Yep. Yeah. Initial, I do it basically a discovery call to see, how I can help them, what they're really looking for. And, the initial call is free. It's just, I spend whatever time is needed to get to know and understand what they're looking for and how I can help. And then from there, it's, engagement, putting together that engagement letter and coming up with what pieces I'm going to be involved in. And we go from there. Usually the beginning is a needs analysis, really, and talking through, what they do, how they do it, why they do it. And that starts helping fill in the gaps of, well, here's the components that you need. And here's, if you want to go best of breed, the ones that we should look at.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. I would strongly encourage you to reach out to Chris if you are going on your, after you listen to this, reach out to Chris. We're definitely happy to help on the MSP side or the IT consulting, IT services side. And our process is usually there's a discovery call and then a 30-minute discovery call. And then, we take it from there. So now with that being said, Todd is our DJ. So I will turn it over to our DJ to do the outro and the music mixing and all that fun stuff.
That's right.
So Todd.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to the RIA Tech Talk podcast brought to you by RIA Workspace. For more podcasts and resources, go to www.riaworkspace.com and check out the Learning Center. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, and stay tuned for more RIA Tech Insights in our next episode. See you later.